in answering a question. I believe we are now ready to.
We're going to a commercial now?
Yes. Thank you. So, welcome to the final session of our conference. And we have four panelists, actually five panelists here today. Since we are running short of time, the presenters have graciously agreed to limit their presentation to about 15 minutes, and this way we can have some time at the end for some questions as well. So our first presenter would be Dr. Rory Hopkins from Ireland. He's going to be talking about Lincoln and the Irish.
Thank you for the doctorate. I didn't earn it, but I'll take it. One thing I've learned about Bill over the last few days is that Bill will use every network to get people involved in this conference. And in my case, he used his own DNA. Through Ancestry.com DNA, we found out that we're second cousins. And we started communicating about a year ago. And Bill asked me, will I attend this conference? And I said, maybe. And then he said, will I actually speak at this conference? And this is how I'm doing here today. I want to go to, and I've learned a lot about Mr. Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln, over the last year. And the angle I'm taking today is looking at Lincoln's relationship with the Irish. And this works okay. I'm not having a great technology there. What? Really struggling with technology today. Okay, I'm going to give you a very brief history of Ireland. Cambridge Press are currently putting together a full history of Ireland. They're on their 5th volume at the moment, so mine is only going to be one slide, but it just gives some context to the discussion. I'm going to talk short history of Irish immigration to America. We'll look at some of Lincoln's Irish connections. Why did the Irish support the Union? There's no reason to. So, very full screen, but I mean, I'm putting 800 years into one slide. Okay, in 1014, the Irish defeated the Vikings at the Battle of Clontarf. And the O'Briens are directly descended from Brian Boru. In 1171, the Normans arrived into Ireland. We actually invited them in. We don't want to talk about that. But 1500, the English hold in Ireland had basically been restricted around the area of Dublin called the Pale. That's where you get that expression, outside of the Pale. The Irish were outside of the Pale, the English were inside the Pale. But during the Tudor times, the English began to re-establish themselves in Ireland. In 1601, after what was called the Battle of Kinsale, the Irish leadership fled from Ireland. That was called the Flight of the Earls. At that stage, 95% of the land in Ireland was owned by Catholics. 1609, the plantation of Ulster started. This is where the English government began to move people from England and predominantly Scotland to Ireland into what we call plantations. Very pertinent to this area because these are the people who became known as the Scotch-Irish, who mainly settled in this part of America. 1649, Cromwell invaded Ireland. Absolute massacre, pushed the Irish over the river, a bit like what we heard yesterday. Jackson pushed the Irish over the river into the poorer part of Ireland across the Shannon. 1690 was the only major European battle held on Irish soil. It was the Battle of the Boyne. It was the battle between William of Orange and King James. William of Orange of Holland won that battle. That was the Protestant ascendancy stayed within Britain. Interesting thing here is Stonewall Jackson's ancestor fought for William of Orange. Two of the other Union generals, Corcoran and Shields, both generals in the Union, their ancestors fought for James. So it's a kind of an interesting connection that even back to 1690 there was a division. 1600s, 1700s, the English establishment established in Ireland what was called the penal laws. form of apartheid. Catholics couldn't own a horse, couldn't own property, couldn't own a weapon, couldn't vote, weren't allowed to practice their religion, weren't allowed to be educated. Interesting enough, the penal laws were also applied to Presbyterians, planters, known as the dissenters. During this period, the Presbyterians, predominantly from Northern Ireland, began to leave America. The first wave of Irish to arrive in the United States, well, before the United States, America, were what we call Scotch-Irish. And they left because they couldn't practice their religion. And that's what they settled mainly in the southern states. Great followers of William of Orange also, and known as Billies. And that's where you got the term hillbillies, because a lot were descended from the Scotch-Irish. 1700, 95% of the land is now owned by Protestants. 1800, by an act of total corruption, Britain set up the Act of Union. They bought out the Irish MPs in the Royal Parliament. And we have there the Union Jack, which is a representative. The red X is a representative of St. Patrick's Cross. The blue is a representative of Scotland, the white X, and the red cross is the representative of St. David. The three kingdoms came together in the Act of Union. In 1821, Catholic emancipation happened. Freedom was given back to Catholics, and the great leader of the time in Ireland was Daniel O'Connell, who was here, and he actually campaigned with Frederick Douglass for the abolition of slavery. And then all disasters took place. In 1845 to 1849, the Great Famine struck, the potato famine. Just to put it in context, the British were always very good at keeping records. In 1841, the population of the island of Ireland was 7 million. By 1851, the population was 5 million. 1 million died, 1 million emigrated. It was the greatest movement of people in world history to that date. And mainly they moved here. Okay? And just hopefully this works. This is the diagram outlines Irish emigration to America. We had the Scotch-Irish came in the 1800s. But there was a trickle of Irish people coming in here. The cotton ships were moving out of New Orleans, New York, going to Liverpool, feeding the great industrial revolution in Britain. But the ships were empty going back, so they needed human ballast. And what better ballast than the Irish? And the Irish got cheap journeys back to America. They were often fooled into be told that New Orleans was actually beside New York. And thousands, that was actually true, thousands of Irish arrived in New Orleans. The Irish immigrant had no value. The unfortunate slave had more value than an Irishman. The slave might be worth $500 or $600, an Irishman was worth zero. Over 30,000 Irish died in digging the canals, the bales around New Orleans from yellow fever. And it kind of explains some of the attitudes the Irish had. What we see here is a huge spike in emigration during the famine. In 1 year, I think it was 1852, 130,000 Irish arrived into New York alone. And this continuous emigration, we see it goes on over the years. Now, I'm going to do some racial stereotyping. I'm Irish, I can do it. Okay? It's about my own race. The Irish who came in were predominantly Catholic. We said the Scotch-Irish who came in the 1800s were generally Presbyterian or from various Protestant religions. But what came in, and the Irish that came in the 81st were Catholic. Okay, we say that about them. They were extremely anti-English and were extremely angry over the famine. And they came here with that. The plans were that they were going to form an army and they were going to go back. They actually mounted an attack after the Civil War against Canada. I think it was the last external attack on Canada. They voted Democrat. We talked about Douglas earlier on, but when the Irish got off the boat, the first thing that happened, they were signed up as citizens and signed up to vote straight off. The reason they were predominantly Democrat, because at this stage we had the Know-Nothings. The Whig Party had formed a very strange alliance of being against slavery, but yet very anti-Catholic. And Lincoln had stayed away from this group, but the Irish had no truck with the Republican Party and the Whigs. They were different. They didn't care, they didn't have a passion for it. These are the lowest of the lowest. Again, as Gary mentioned last night, if you watch the news, you see immigrants coming up through Central America at the moment. I think the Irish were the same coming in coffin ships. They didn't think of these grand political gestures. They just were going for a better life. And they didn't support the war initially. They had no interest in it. But they definitely supported the Union, because the Irish who came here were it was a one-way ticket to Ireland, to America. They weren't going back. And they saw their futures in America. They wanted to be Americans. They wanted the Union to stay in place. Now, Lincoln and the Irish. He was not a member of the Know-Nothings, the Natives Party. That part of the Whig Party didn't appeal to him. He had no interest in it. And a lot of what Gary said earlier on, it made it easier for me to explain. He didn't see himself as an elitist, and he saw himself as a common man. He met many Irish and Irish Americans through his life. Teachers, political adversaries, James Shields, who he actually was going to have a duel with and became a great friend of it after, was Irish born in County Tyrone. And he was a senator, I think he's a senator in 3 states. And they often said if he wasn't born in Ireland, he probably would have been a president. Constituents, the rail workers had moved up and they were big supporters of Douglas, but he met Irish people every day. His children's nannies and many of the White House staff were Irish. The coachman on the unfortunate night of his assassination was Irish. He had a love of Irish ballads and wit, and often quoted from the Irish patriot Robert Emmet's famous speech from the dock. And using all his political guile, he needed to build relationships with the Irish, with the leaders of the Irish American community. Because at that stage, the Irish didn't want to take part in the war. But what Lincoln knew was he needed soldiers. He knew that the Yankees weren't going to provide, the Native Americans were not going to provide the source of soldiers he needed for the Civil War. And he knew to get the Irish on board. So the 2 things the Irish cared about was religion. The Archbishop of New York was John Hughes, known as Dagger. Born in County Tyrone in Ireland in 1797, emigrated to the US in 1817, became a priest, soon became Archbishop of New York. Very close relationship with the Democratic Party, and set the plans in place for building St. Patrick's Cathedral on 5th Avenue. He was asked at a very early stage by Lincoln to provide chaplains for the war, and he was delighted to be asked this, because they wanted to be seen on parity with the Protestant churches. He represented the Union on visits to France and Spain and Rome, and worked on the different archdioceses in these countries to make them pro-Union. That was his first contact. Second contact was Thomas Francis Meagher. And in 1 minute, I'll give a very quick history of Thomas Francis Meagher. He's born to a very rich family in Waterford. His father was the first Catholic mayor of Waterford in 200 years, and later a member of Parliament. Educated in England, started legal studies. In 1843, he joined the Young Irelander movement, strived to gain Irish independence. In 1848, before his rebellion, he actually travelled to France and got the idea for the Irish flag, the tricolour, from the French tricolour, which means green Catholics, white peace, orange Protestants. That's our national flag at the moment. After the failed rebellion in 1848, he was arrested and sentenced to death, but later commuted to 14 years deportation in Tasmania, the far side of the world, and in Van Diemen's Land. He escaped in 1850 and arrived in New York in 1852. He was instantly a hero and a leader of the Irish Americans. His first night in New York, 7,000 people turned up outside his house. The local militia, the fighting 69th, marched past him. He was delighted to see Irish people armed, and they were well armed, past his house, and plans were starting to be put in place. Lincoln made him a general of the Irish 69th. The Irish 69th were a militia. They weren't very well equipped when they went into Bull Run, or molasses, depending which view you have, and they got hammered in Bull Run. They lost 69 troops, 200 were missing. But in the camp after the battle, Sherman talked down Mar, warned him that if he abandoned the camp, he'd shoot him. Lincoln came and visited the Irish troops. Mar went back to New York, and at Jones's field in New York, 60,000 Irish turned up, and he did a fundraiser for the war. And the Irish then formed the Fighting 69th, and he was made a general by Lincoln. What happened here in these two moves is he brought the Catholic Church on board, religion, and he brought Irish nationalists on board. Mar went on to become acting governor of Montana, but subsequently drowned in 1867. Earlier.
2 minutes.
Yeah. Fortunately, it wasn't always a happy story with the Irish. Around the time of the Battle of Gettysburg, the Irish started riots. They initially started off as riots against the draft, but it became race riots in New York. 120 people murdered. The Union forces were needed to be redeployed for Gettysburg because it soon became apparent that the slaves were going to be freed, and Irish saw this as a threat because the black people were going to come north to take their jobs, and began a race riot. This is probably the worst part of Irish American history. 2 Protestant churches were burnt down. It took the Archbishop 4 days to speak to the congregation and ended it. And just to wrap up at the end, some facts. 160 to 200,000 Irish-born people fought for the Union Army. Also, 20,000 Irish fought for the Confederate Army. Best tradition of Irish people, we fought ourselves. And they actually made it, I think it was at Fredericksburg. And it is estimated that at least 30,000 Irish died in the Civil War, American Civil War. Second to the First World War, more Irish died in the First World War. The continuous flow of Union recruits directly from Ireland is often attributed as a major factor in the final defeat of the Confederates. People literally signed up to join the Union forces in Ireland, got on the ships, got off in New York, and went straight into training because they got accelerated citizenship. And what we're seeing there, just to sum up in 1 minute, what we're actually seeing there is Lincoln used his political guile to build a relationship between the Irish, who naturally didn't want to fight for the Union, but he brought them on board using his personality, his political skill, by bringing the church, the Catholic Church, and bringing the Irish nationalists on board. Okay, thank you.